Tracy,
Hello, Wulwyn.
good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot we're going to be talking about today.
Really? You don't say.
Yeah. Well, what were you saying? You were saying to me before we went live, you were just like, what did you say?
I am compassion fatigued, and I had a meeting, so I have a weekly meeting with Sarah Madras where we just plan for people process equal profits, people plus process equals profits. And we didn't meet, we just talked. And the talk was how I was feeling. I am feeling overwhelmed, and and just and she said, "Oh, and compassion fatigued," and I go, oh, "That's it, huh?" And that's how I feel, Tracy. Just compassion fatigued. I think it's the season we're in, elections. It's everything that's going on, and we'll talk, but that's, and then plus my just my path that I'm on right now. So a mixture is not a perfect storm because it's not a storm. It's just everything coming together at one time, and just teasing through it. You?
Yeah. When I'm hearing too, it reminds me that, it's kind of what builds resilience. There's that tension in our bodies that holds everything in place.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, when we have that tension and we're able to move with or utilize the tension, right, for the role that it's meant to play, it builds resilience, right? And so, like, if we're in the gym working a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
that tension that we create, is a big part, is a big ingredient in building that muscle. Without the tension, we wouldn't be able to build the muscle.
Correct.
And that's the piece that, the other piece that I heard is fuel. In order to do anything, we need fuel.
Mm.
And I know one of the things that, to give compassion to others, right? To be available open-heartedly. That's really what it is. Compassion to me is being available to other people with an open heart. In order to be that, we have to, first of all, develop an ability for us to be heart open, even when we may be feeling like there's a lot coming at us, which our first reaction, if we're in our defenses, is to shut things down.
Gotcha.
But also that we need to receive to give. And right now, I mean, I was feeling it. So this past weekend, I had the opportunity to do some very important work to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a small group. This is the first time all year I have been in a group of less than 10 people normally.
Gotcha.
One person was wearing a mask, but not even because of COVID, but because of allergies to cats, because there were cats around.
Okay.
But I didn't even realize how much I was missing that physical normalcy, the hugs, the just being with one another, the talking, that, the nature of this work also is very hands-on.
Correct.
So that aspect fueled me. In fact, so much so that it was a 2-day workshop. When I was driving home, I found myself going into grief, thinking, when will I have that again? When will I be able to have that fuel up? I mean, granted, at home we have it all the time. I mean, I'm bookended between two love bugs. I mean, my daughter just thrives on hugs, as my husband does too. Physical touch is important to them.
Sure.
And so I haven't been without it. But there is that aspect of other and being out in the world where we can actually be more than just seeing each other or across the room from each other. That, having that piece that I had forgotten was so important to fuel me. And I realized, I think that realization almost has created an exhaustion in me. Like I wasn't even aware I was running on empty.
Yeah.
Until I was.
Correct.
Until I was aware. And with that awareness, that mental awareness, I'm aware of just how depleted in that regard. And yet at the same time, so much more is being asked of us. So less energy, less fuel in the tank, more needs, you know, for energy expenditure.
Yeah.
And that isn't off balance, you know, type of thing. And so that's what I've been experiencing. That's what I was hearing when you were talking, and that it definitely syncs up to what I've been experiencing personally.
So in my conversation with Sarah, I talked about stealing away, right? Stealing away meaning just shutting down activities. And when I say shutting down activities, it's church. It's and I'm not telling people to to not go there, right? But I'm just shutting down my activities, even a meeting or two with clients. I shut them down because in order for me to provide, to be my best self, I have to be healthy, not only physically, you know, but mentally and spiritually. So I'm all of these pieces that if I'm working out in the gym and I'm great physically, and my air in my wheel are components of my spiritual, my physical, my mental, my family, my work, all of these things. When my physical is at a 10 and my spiritual is at a 5 and my mental is at a 2, you can look good, brother. But guess what? That wheel is flat, where everything in the wheel, I think Zig Ziglar has this wheel of life with 7 or 8 components, right? And if one of those are below 5 or 6, you're running on flat. That's why your wife, the family's great, but work isn't. You're not balanced. So and mine stems from the elections, right? It stems from the elections. It stems from Democrats. It stems from Republicans. It stems from my friends say on both sides, saying certain things, right? And I remember, I think it was Jacob in the Bible asked, "Hey God, whose side are you on?" And it was an angel, and the angel said, "I'm on none of your sides. I'm on I'm on the Lord's side." And I'm sitting looking, and I'm taking myself out of this body and looking out and saying, "Gosh, whose side are we on?" And I see Christians, Republicans, Christians, Democrats. I see the things that, and I'm not going to say they say, because it's not they, Democrats or Republicans, the things we are saying, people, and please, I'm saying both sides. It's not one side. It's both sided. It's the things that we're saying. And because of who I am, I cannot say certain things. I can't say certain things. One, I respect the office of the president, and the person, if I don't respect him or her, because I respect the office, I just can't. However, when I read comments, I go, yeah, yeah, you know, like that, thing in the back, like, yeah, say it. Or I read other comments, like,
He just said butt head.
there you go. I'm like, no, yeah. And I did that. So our subdivision has a Facebook page, and I found it, and I went on there, and these people, boom, boom, boom. And I'm there like, oh, yeah, but I'm a coward to not go on there and say what I want to say.
And I use that hard word because it's not cowardice for me not to say it. It's just my belief. But I'm finding myself in this season, I'm getting on a side. And I'm not supposed to get on sides. And don't get me wrong, I voted, but I'm still not getting on sides. I'm not supposed to get on sides. In terms of the fighting and in terms of, because this thing is going to end. And when it ends, then what? Words stay. Like I saw a friend, I'm not going to say from where, who had liberal dogs. He stated liberal dogs in his statement. And when I read it, I was like, oh my goodness. So that's the way he thinks. And this is really going to be an eavesdrop conversation, Traci, because I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the other people who are listening. I'm talking to you. This is our phone conversations, right? And when I read liberal dog, I'm like, oh my goodness, a liberal dog. So if, here's Wulwyn's thought process. So it's very mechanical, highly mechanical, process driven. If I want to see something as nothing, I will see it as an animal. So if I'm acting on that animal, I can say I'm not doing something to a person, I'm doing something to an animal. My wife goes, honey, that is very harsh. I'm like, baby, that's my thought process. Because if you tell me I'm a dog, and I'm not saying I'm a liberal or I'm a right or a left, I'm saying on the words, if you tell me I'm a liberal dog, you're one step to kicking me. You're one step to shooting me. You're one step because in your mind, I'm not a human being, I'm a dog.
It's called dehumanization, and they've studied it. That's exactly what Hitler did. So he ran programs to dehumanize the Jews.
There you go.
And other marginalized individuals.
So
that we see them is less than human, and therefore we're willing to exclude them and do things to them that we wouldn't normally do if we saw them as human.
Excellent, excellent. That, my friends, is my highly astute Traci Phillips.
I'm just a walking dictionary when it comes to a lot of facts. That's all.
Oh, that's what I say. That's what I know. So I say that, and then I go, you know what? In this season, I don't want to go around anybody. I don't want to be around people who I have to be highly graceful, highly compassionate, to see sides and say, and do this.
You know what I'm hearing? You don't want to have to walk across a terrain that has landmines in it. Because if you think about it, if we know we're walking across a field and it has landmines, how are we walking across it? How much energy does that take?
That's the fatigue, sister. That's the fatigue. I am fatigued. I'm weak. I am weak. So I'm going to say it the other way. I'm not strong. I need
That's strength. The balance. But that's the balance. That's what you were talking about, the wheel, which I do that with clients too. I have the wheel of life, you know. So when I just had a client do that for the first time, and he says, well, I wouldn't call it a wheel. I'd call it, I don't know what. It's like an amoeba. It has this, you know, there are divots and it's out here and in here. And if that were a wheel on our car, obviously it would be flat, right? And I think what I heard you saying when you were talking about that, and it also applies to sides. A side isn't the whole, part of the whole, right? It would be like expecting our wheel to run off of half the wheel.
Mm.
So that's also not balanced. It's not whole, it's flat, right? Actually, that's what a flattened wheel looks like. It looks like half a wheel, right? Because it's straight on the bottom and, you know. And when we're doing that, we're not balanced. We have come to think about balance as doing. What do I need to do to create balance?
Mm.
But what I'm hearing you saying is, who do I need to be balanced? It's not what do I need to do to create balance or have balance in my life. It's who do I need to be balanced?
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I'm hearing you saying you need to be is in environments, in a mindset, in a state of not taking in certain things that tap you out, right? It's this idea of what do I need to be of balance within myself, not what do I need to be doing to create balance, but what do I need to do or not do, in some cases, within myself to be that balance that I'm seeking. Right? And sides are inherently not balanced. When we take one side, I mean, if we look at a scale, if we put everything on one side of the scale, it's like this, right? It's not balanced.
Correct.
Right? The other piece too is that, you know, my daughter, 13-year-old daughter, we don't even really talk about politics or anything in the house. She asked a question the other night. She said, don't people realize that what they see on TV is half the story at best?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I added. She didn't say that part, but she says, I don't understand why people are so quick to believe everything they hear and not take time to realize, not take time to think about what they see with their own eyes. And it's not just the seeing, it's the sensing. Right? So it's not just about the eyes. We see with other parts of ourselves. We see through our instincts. But why are people so quick to jump on someone else's story or analysis or translation or side? Right? Why is that? Well, we've been very indentured to this concept of trying to hold each other up. Again, burden bearing, all that stuff we talked about last time.
Correct.
So when somebody's feeling down, like, oh, I'm so angry that the Democrats or the Republicans or that is doing this. Oh, that's awful. Yes, I support you. I support you. We're very geared towards that. And so we're supporting sides without even knowing sometimes that we're supporting sides, unintentionally supporting sides by just supporting someone who is taking a side. As opposed to saying, well, is it about that or is it about something else in you that's causing this upset that you're experiencing?
Correct.
Is it really what that person said, or is it what Trump said, or is it what, you know, this party is doing? Is it really about that, or is that simply the trigger to something that's going on in you that gets to be looked at? Because sides are about the same thing that I see in every system, and I'm going to use healthcare because it's a perfect example, is we band-aid everything. I'll just slap a band-aid on it. It's a symptom. In Western medicine, we treat the cause, the symptom is the cause. We diagnose the symptom,
Correct.
right? And we treat the symptom, not the actual cause for the symptom. We do the same thing here. Somebody says something and we react to that. The Democrats do this and the Republicans react, or the Republicans do this and the Democrats react. And we then start to react based on the symptoms on the surface of what's going on. You know, so to your point of what we want in the long run is we want connection. What is connection? It's coming together. The yin yang concept. It's the two sides of the light and dark, right? Within ourselves, we want to accept all aspects of ourselves. This is what our soul wants, right? Our light, our dark, the in-between, the gray, the shades of gray. Right. You know, we are working from a soul perspective to identify and integrate and accept and embrace and own all of it.
Correct.
All of it. It doesn't mean There are parts of it we decide not to release and all of that, but it's about addressing the whole, not parts of the whole, and not masking the ones we don't like and projecting on other parties and taking sides. And I choose this side. It's like they say to Facebook, everybody shows their best side. There's always other sides, and there aren't even just two sides. There's multiple sides, right? Unless we're a one-dimensional object, in which case there's two sides. But if we're not one-dimensional, there's multiple sides. Right? So that's the piece that I'm feeling you so much, because I'm in that same space, that we have to bust through these paradigms that we have been bringing to the table over and over, these patterns of behavior, of thinking, of taking action, that are just not true. They are just they're a band-aid, they're a fraction, they're a symptom of the entire spectrum that we're meant to be understanding and looking at. And what's fatiguing is that it's like if somebody were to tell me, yeah, well, we've all had that. And we've also all been there, where we're caught up with something that someone said, or the fact we broke up with someone and our heart's broken and we can't stop talking about it. And our friends and loved ones are like, oh my God, when are they going to get over this?
Shut up.
When are they going to get over this and move on? Like, you know, they're fatigued at us talking about the same story over and over. Those are the paradigms. And I think collectively, we're all fatigued by these paradigms, because we know they're not serving us. We know they're not even half the story. We know they're just a symptom. We know they're small-minded and fractional. We know that they're not what we're supposed to be working from. And yet we just keep digging more and more and more. It's like somebody, well, what is it? The definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different outcomes. And it's fatiguing when you take your head and you jam it up against the wall and it hurts and you keep expecting it not to. That's why we're fatigued. We've worn our paradigms out to such a point we're exhausted by them. And instead of waking up and realizing, oh, wow, it's the way in which we're looking and doing things and acting and reacting and all of that. No, we just try to do it harder. And it's gonna, and I think that's what's going to be the eventual implode. How it's eventually going to implode, is that we can only do that so much before we are so exhausted that we stop. And that's where I think we are right now. I sense it. People are so exhausted. They're not doing anything. We can't react anymore, even, because we're so exhausted. And while we're laying there exhausted on the ground, wondering why we're so exhausted, this is what I want the message to be. It's our paradigms. It's how we're choosing to do everything. Because it's not about the doing, it's about the being. It always starts with the being. You know, yesterday I was like very in a ball over the powers that be that have been manipulating and controlling, and specifically around the insurance companies. Because of something going on with our health insurance right now. And it just, so angry. I'm like, you know, all in this tight little internal ball about the whole thing. And, you know, all they care about is money, and they don't really care about supporting us, and just the whole thing. And I'm like, I need to take a walk. And I went out on a walk, and I believe many things to be true. And one of them is there's a solution for everything. I believe that deeply. I know there's a solution for everything.
There is.
No matter what. And so I'm on this walk and I'm reminding myself there's a solution for everything. I also believe there's a purpose for everything. And so if what is the purpose of me being in this state right now? And I found myself reminding myself, well, what we resist persists. I'm resisting this energy. And so it's persisting in my reality. And so I don't want that. And so I'm going to stop resisting. How do I get into the flow? And I just started then talking to myself about the truths I know. I know this is for me. I know this is a lesson. What's the lesson? What's the solution? And I don't know if you know this tool. It's called Ho'oponopono. It's actually an ancient traditional tool used by the tribes in Hawaii.
Spell it for me, please.
Ho'oponopono is HO'Opono. I'm terrible at spelling out loud.
It's okay.
But that's the gist. You can Google it. Joe Vitale actually wrote a book. I think it's called Beyond Limits or something about limits. About that, he studied with one of the most renowned, I think he's a doctor, and a Hawaiian gentleman who is kind of the expert in this. Got the whole story, studied under this guy, you know, has some amazing stories around it and wrote a book on it. But it's a really powerful, simple tool. And it consists of 3 statements. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you.
3 statements.
I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And the story, you know, I'm not going to get into the story, but there is a story about this doctor who helped completely clear and heal an insane asylum in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
They had an Alcatraz-like situation where all of the very dangerous, insane, you know, incarcerated individuals were sent to this place because they wanted to lock them away from the rest of civilization, and this is where they ended up. And it was overrun, and people were starting to get killed and hurt within this establishment. And this doctor came in and didn't speak to a single inmate, and through using this tool was able to heal. Everybody started changing and how they interacted with one another and all that. So anyway, it's in the book. But a friend of mine was an expert at this and taught a number of classes that I used to go to when she was in the area. She's in, I don't know where she's living now. I think she was in California for a while. But I used this and I started using it. And I, without an intention in a certain direction, just about being in the flow. It wasn't that I was saying sorry to myself specifically. I wasn't saying sorry to the insurance companies specifically. I wasn't, I was just saying it.
Correct.
And it got me into this rhythm of relaxation. And you want to know that within a few minutes of me realizing I was relaxed, suddenly the solution came. I was like, oh, what if we were to do this, 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 and this, and this? And not only did the solution come, this feeling of empowerment, of being with it, realizing there was a purpose for this blockage, this paradigm, this manipulative system, this greed, this, I didn't even need to know what the purpose was, but there was a purpose because we've continued to feed into it.
Yeah.
Right? What we resist persists, but also what we continue to allow persists as well. And so it was a collective realization that I could continue to resist it and continue to support it. I could continue to not try to take it on and allow it and continue to support it, or I could get into a flow state. It recognize that it is what it is and that it exists, not trying to like disengage from it, not trying to engage or disengage, but neutralize the situation so I could get perspective, come up with solution, and then push for the solution. And whether the solution works or not, at least I'm in the energy of not focusing on the problem. Because if what we focus on is what we create. So if I'm focusing on a problem, I'm going to create more problems. If I'm focusing on a solution, I'm going to create more solutions. And at the end of the day, how I felt told me I was on the right page. Because when I get all squished up and, what is that doing to my health? What is that doing to my mental state? What is that doing? Because, this mental stuff between being separated from one another and in quarantine and how that's affecting us mentally, and how the fear mongering is affecting us mentally, and how the worries about the election are affecting us mentally. Our mental state feeds into our physical state. If we are mentally fragile, we are going to become physically fragile, which means our immune system and everything else that goes with it. So if we want to be strong and don't get COVID, we cannot be mentally weak.
Correct.
And everything we're choosing to feed ourselves on. So that was a choice of shifting, just like your choice of disengaging with certain things because you don't want to feed on that stuff.
So you know, great points, Traci. The strange thing is I don't watch the news. I do not, because that I knew it was a feeder, right?
Yeah.
I do not watch. I do not, I would, so Facebook, I would come in and put, put certain things on Facebook business wise and put, and, motivate, etc. And then I would stay and read. I would stay and read. I would stay and read. So Alex Jones, thanks for listening in, man. You can go ahead and share this, please, people who are listening. Hey, help us share it. Let more people hear it. You stated focusing on solutions, create solutions, great wisdom, so right. So, so true. So I would come in and just, wheel through, but then it starts to stick on you in ways that you don't expect it to stick. And
Quantum physics.
and there you go. And I'm saying to myself, golly, why am I feeling this way? And so I have the lens you're talking about. My lens comes spiritually, right? So it's a spiritual lens that I'm using to look at this, and I'm using these. If I didn't have a personal, and I can see why people who don't have a personal relationship with God, how in times like this, they can decide to heck with this God. I can see it, because if I didn't have a personal relationship with God at this time, I'll be done with Christianity. I will be done with Christianity. And here's why. I hear all the different conversations about abortion. And I swear I am against abortion. I can't stand it. It's wrong, right? But killing a baby, sin, lying, is on the same level as killing a baby.
Because it kills our faith and trust in one another.
Fornicating, getting your diggity on before marriage is the same as lying on somebody and that person dying, which means you kill them. You know what I mean? So when I am in conversations, or I'm hearing the conversation that it's only sticking on abortion. And as a Christian, and I say to myself, I agree with you, but let's talk about the whole spectrum. I cannot take the Bible and take a section of the Bible for my narrative. I cannot do that. Then I'm being Pharisaic. I'm being hypocritical. Thus, when I was the one looking and saying, laughing at people saying, the Holy Spirit just said, wow, Wulwyn, tell me about who you are now. And then I went, oh, I said, oh my goodness. So this is it. What is purity? These are the questions I'm asking myself. What is purity? What is worshiping in spirit and in truth? What is all of these things that God, you've called me to go out into the world to build churches, hospitals, schools, clinics, etc. And you say it's not about if it's in a Muslim town, if it's in a Christian place, in a Buddhist area, Hindu. When I tell you to go and build a hospital there, you go and build, because God is about people. He is about people. It is so and we grandstand and talk about these different concepts about, you know, don't do this, but it's all about people. We will be so surprised that when we do get to this place, heaven or wherever we're getting, and God is there, and we see somebody who is the definition of evil, and we go and say, "Golly, how did you get here, dude?" Like, God's merciful, man. God did something for me at the last minute and blah, blah, blah. So who are we to start it? And then the other conversation is this, sweetheart. The gays, people who are the lesbians. These people are humans. They feel. How in the world, if we say that we are talking for, we are here for people, and in our conversations, we point and we do this to them, then where is the definition of love? Where is the definition of love? Where is the definition of love when the thing that you're supposed, and again, I'm talking from the lens of Christianity, when you say God is love, and then but you come and you talk about
except for,
and then you say then they say, oh, yeah, abortion's wrong, gay is wrong, and but then at the end they go, but I love you.
Yeah, that's what really messes a lot of people up in family dynamics too. It's like your parents are slapping you around and then like, I love you. And it's like, wow, we start to.
What love is for me is you're gay, cool. You're a lesbian, cool. That's a hug. You aborted, you kill somebody, you do that. Come on. Because if we sit and say, that they are, golly, I want us to turn the video on our lives to show us when we were alone looking at pornography, going, oh man, or when we were going to the titty bar, or excuse my French, excuse my language, but I'm just being raw because I'm fatigued. When we were going to and it's not even going to those places. It's even thinking them, as the words say. Hey, it's when you think it and then you say, oh, I've never done it. No, you thought it before. That is,
and now you're lying. Yeah, right. So we're going to add lying to the whole. Yeah.
That is as big as the abortion, is as big as the liar, is as big as the murderer, is as big as the tax collector who's stealing. So we really have to level set. And when we stand and say we are Christians and we're talking, we have to be very careful and really do a 360 conversation and not a 90 or a 180 conversation. Because the people who you're trying to bring in the fold are looking at you and saying, hypocrite, hypocrite, hypocrite. Yes. And that's the part I can't stand.
And as soon as the trust is broken, the connection with the human. So what I'm hearing you saying is we need to prioritize the human first, the love first, right? And that is really what it's about. I mean, is that these other parts of the conversations can come in, but they will not be of any impact to the connection of the people if trust isn't first there. And we don't have trust if we're sitting there looking at each other as hypocrites, or if we're looking at ourselves as hypocrites. If we don't have self-trust, how are we going to trust others? We don't, if we don't trust ourselves. And so if we know when we're lying, we may think we're lying to everybody else, which is, I'll tell you one thing, folks, if you think you're lying to people, you're only lying more to yourself, because people can pick up when you're lying. And I think that that's the piece, is that, this brings more and more, again, to the point of dehumanizing the connection. We have had so much of that this year between social distancing and being on sides, and it's so much easier than with the social distancing to then connect on places like Facebook, where people will say things that they would never say to someone's face. all of this dehumanization, that's a paradigm we fed into. And that's the other piece that I'm hearing here that we're talking about is, what are you feeding yourself on? You know, when you were on the community chat and you're like, you know, what were you feeding yourself on in that moment, right? What are we feeding? Are we feeding ourselves off of? I had a conversation with a client today and he goes, I just realized what shift you are talking about here is I was coming into today ready to just talk about, you know, this thing that this happened in my personal relationship with so-and-so, and I was going to go up like I normally do. And this entire talk has been about me, and look at how much we've covered. Look at how many solutions I've come up with. Look at, because I decided to feed myself on the things that I could actually chew and come up with a solution for, actually produce something that is valuable to me and therefore valuable to others.
Yes.
Chewing on someone else's conversation, chewing on someone else's story, chewing on something from the past is not helping us in our present state, right? So that whole thing of what am I, that's when I was taking a walk. It's like, what am I chewing on right now? What am I feeding myself on? This disgust for this system that I think is so broken and corrupt. Well, what is that going to produce if I'm eating that? If I'm literally nourishing myself on that stuff, what is that going to produce in me and from me? I don't want to feed off of that. What do I want to feed off of instead? What environments, what people, what thoughts, what paradigms, what? And that's where we have to get real.
Correct.
You know, the other thing I want to say, just as a side note, because it has to do with the workshop that I was doing this past weekend, which is called Family Constellations Work. In Family Constellations, it's all about healing family dynamics. And one of the things that we don't realize from an energetic and spiritual standpoint is that when a human soul dies, and especially those who have been disenfranchised, and this, to the extent of aborted children, children who were miscarried, so they may not have even, the mother might have not even have known there was a child. People who in the family were black sheep and cast aside, and nobody talks about them. Nobody wants to even acknowledge on the family tree that they even existed. Guess what happens? Those souls were in a body, therefore they had a place in the family dynamic. And until they are seen, heard, and honored in that place, somebody else holds it. So what I see in family constellation, I've been doing this work for about 7 years. What I see this is a typical, stereotypical experience where you have a single child come into a family. I see this a lot in Catholic families because they have a lot of children. They also don't tend to believe in birth control. Right. Or at least they, you know, back in the day, especially because we're dealing with long generations of dynamic here. Single child is in the family. That child thinks they're the only born child. But meanwhile, there were all of these miscarriages. That child is a depressed child from birth. That child struggles through life. That child has depressive issues and suicidal tendencies. That child comes to a situation like Family Constellations and realizes they are holding the space for 12 other children who were lost before they came. They were the only living soul that came from those parents that survived. And because either the parents don't know about or don't want to talk about these other lost children, that one child that made it carries the burden of the souls that are departed, that were never seen and heard and talked about, carries the burden of those souls. And until they are given a place, and until they are honored as being a member of the family, that child carries them. And we see it sometimes jumps generations. But as soon as they are, I can't begin to tell you, once that's recognized, what it does to that person who's living, who's been carrying the representation of these past souls. Because in families, we connect either through love or through dysfunction, but we connect. And guess what? It's not just in families. It's in all of us, because we are one big soul family when it comes to this planet. And so where we are disenfranchising, whether the person's gay or this or that, we are saying you don't exist. You don't matter. You don't. That's why the Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, any lives matter conversation is so important, because when we dehumanize, and we don't acknowledge other human beings as human and important and valuable and a part of the human collective family,
right,
we carry the burden of that.
oh.
And we suffer.
And I was about to say, it shows up in multiple ways. And when you were talking about, as you were speaking this, all I thought was, spirits. It's spiritual. It's spiritual. The family, it comes down. How I know DNA, etc., right, comes you, but some things we don't understand. There are aspects to DNA. Oh my goodness.
Well, we pass down crises, and that's where a lot of times you find a generation, great-great-grandfather had some terrible catastrophe happen before he started having children. Well, any children he had after that crisis gets passed down in the DNA. And now all of a sudden we have great-great-great-great-grandchild who is having issues in reaction to what happened to great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And we wonder what in the world happened. Nothing that this child experienced themselves would indicate that they should be having these types of issues, but it goes upline generations. It just skipped generations, or it was passed down in a different way from generation to generation because it comes through the DNA. And this stuff is real. I mean, I'm telling you folks, like I've seen it in the 7 years of people doing it and healing from this. Bringing back the humanity and the connection within family lines that then allows us to connect more as a global family. It's incredible work. And we can be doing it all the time in our lives.
I've heard this said, someone did this on TV in Yala Van Sant, I think, or someone else. It was the person they wanted to forgive had passed away. And the exercise was, hey, get a chair, put the chair in front of you, and talk to that person who's that spirit that's there saying, hey, Dad, I'm sorry for what I did. I apologize, and da 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 da. There is something, as you said, you're honoring that person, you're honoring that space, you're honoring your dad in that space that that spiritually fixes what those issues are. And we have the so-called physical DNA and the spiritual DNA, and understanding that physical DNA, all these different things, that lineage, and then there's a spiritual lineage. Again, my lens are Christianity, and I'm not going to apologize on that, right? Because somebody else is whatever it is, and they have the right to state it. When I receive Christ as my personal savior, I am attaching that spiritual DNA to myself, where that DNA is eternal, that DNA loves, that DNA doesn't go in the corner and go, that DNA appreciates all, that DNA honors, that DNA looks back and say, when grandpa, granddad, great did this, I pray and that curse removes from my family and I recognize it. That DNA enables me to not be prejudiced, racist, or whatever it is, those things that are. But guess what? It's a choice. It's a choice on my part to lean and experience and take those pieces. As you said, I'm pretty sure in those family constellations pieces in those workshops is a choice that when they get the solution, you offer the solution to them. It's a choice for them to say, I agree, or girl, that's dumb. I'm not even touching that. And you cannot uncover the solution if you don't do that piece, or you may uncover it later on, right?
Well, only certain things will present that you're ready to accept.
Correct.
Right. So anything that you're not ready to accept will not present.
Traci, got 9 more minutes. What are you feeling now? What's
I feel like what's come up a lot in this conversation, what I just heard you speak to very firmly and directly, is choosing our way and owning it. I've been talking about this concept of ownership for a long, long time. You said, I'm not going to apologize for my Christian format. You know, we get to own, but, you know, guess what? A part of our ability to own also means we get to drop any attachments to how other people own themselves. And I feel like that's really where I mean, there's so much of this connection that makes us feel like, well, but I'm attached to this person, and if they act this way, then that keeps me from being able to do that. You know, we get to honor our own ownerships and others as well, and realize that as much as the story tells us we're connected to these people, and therefore if they choose to move left and that affects us being able to move right, you know, that's a story we're telling.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the shift in this paradigm that needs to happen, is that we feel exhausted because everybody else is acting in a way that makes us, in a way that we are not choosing to act, or that when we do act, we feel the depletion immediately, right? But what if we were to zip up, in the sense of not zip up and pull ourselves away, because I think that's how we learned to do it in the past. It's either I can be who I am in the group, or I have to totally disenfranchise myself in order to be who I am. Correct. You know, I have to change who I am in the group if I can't be who I am, or I have to leave the group altogether. I think what we're being asked to do is own who you are, walk the walk if that's part of your ownership model. Be the model, be the brand, be the, you know, I always ask myself, I still always ask me, what would Jesus do? You know, like I use that all the time. What would Jesus do? You know, because he wasn't so much teaching as he was living. His teachings were through his life, his modeling. Yes, he spoke and he shared what he was learning and knowing, but that wasn't his impetus. It was just to live that way, to be that soul being, right? And I think that's why I'm so touched by his stories, and why I tend to lean into that more than I even do God sometimes. You know, it's like, not what does God want me to do? What would Jesus do? I do that all the time. Because to me, that's his representation in human form. And I'm a human.
Correct. You can relate.
So it's a closer connection, right? If I could follow what I think Jesus would do as a man on this earth, then it's a little bit closer to who I am as a human being on this earth too. And yet, at the end of the day, I think we've talked a lot of talk over the years, but we're finally getting to the point where if we're not walking the walk, what the heck is the point? It's not producing the outcomes that we claim we're going for, because again, you say, oh, I didn't do that, and meanwhile you just did it. I mean, the lie causes a division of flow, right? Like, so if the flow is what creates the outcome you're going for, as soon as there's lying in there, it chops it right off.
Oh yeah.
It blocks that flow. And so you can't create that way. So that's what I feel is coming out of these conversations, is we get to really lean, and maybe that's part of what we're being led to do. We're so exhausted to the point where we can't tap into what's outside of ourselves, that it's forcing us to start to contemplate some of these things. I hope that's what this is about, right? Because some people are also taking it about, it's done, I'm done, enough, I can't take this anymore.
Yes.
I mean, if that's your interpretation, then I'm going to honor that. I don't agree with it, but I'll honor it.
Correct.
Because I don't think it is what it's about. I think it's about, not that it's so difficult that it's time to go and you have no more left in you. I think you have no more left of the old ways of doing things. You have no more left of the old paradigms that aren't serving you, and you're exhausted from trying, but that doesn't mean it's completely over, right? It's all in how we interpret it, but we have to be willing to walk the walk. And if we are not willing to do that, then
I agree with you, and I think, you know, summarizing what this conversation was, to me, for me, is really being introspective, where I was pointing and saying, gosh, they do that, they do this. I was the one going, and we have to be introspective. We have to be true to ourselves in order to grow. Growth comes when you can look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself there are spots on your face, you have crooked teeth, your ears are big, your head is big, or your head small.
I have really big ears.
Girl, don't stop that. Stop that. You don't even talk that. That's my trademark. You can't beat me.
What about my forehead? I'm like 5 head. Like
you see these horns here on this here, you got those horns on there. But you see, once you can look at yourself, see these teeth, the crooked, but be you, because when you introspect and you do all these things and understand your core values and your purpose, and you can get on the stage, as you said, and you can own it and engage with it. And that's where being authentic comes from. That's where when we get on and I can tell you, I'm weak. I can't take this anymore. I feel terrible. And in the conversation, I go, I'm there screaming, laughing at one side or the other. And then, but I am being hypocritical. In order for me to bring my best self out, I have to be true to what my true north is. And whatever your true north is, you know, don't get caught up in, I always say this, Michael Jordan playing against Dominique Wilkins. They're fighting, they're doing whatever. Or Kobe, not Kobe Bryant, rest his soul, LeBron and Draymond Green from Golden State Warriors. They're playing the game. After the game, we are out here fussing and cussing one another. Do you know where LeBron and Draymond are? They are having dinner. Man, that dunk, man, you put on me, that was an awful dunk. Yeah, man, that rebound you did was great. And here we are. And they go home with the millions and rest.
it's all a game. What we do in that game. Right? Are we sharpening our skills? Are we putting our all in? Are we going for the 3-pointer? Are we going for the safe 2-pointer? Right? What we do is entirely up to us during this game. And once it's over, it's over. And so really how we play the game is as important as that we play the game. And that's, I think, the biggest piece is how are we playing this game? And how do we want to be playing this game? And what legacy? I mean, we're talking about guys that left behind a legacy, right? What legacy do we want to leave behind when we're done with the game?
Yes.
That's what I think we're really needing to look at on from the larger angle lens right now, is that this, like you said, the election will be over and then what? Things will come and go. The difficulties we're challenged with now will not last forever. No. And once they're over, then what? Will we be happy with how we handled it? Will we be apologetic? Will we feel like we have to go back and apologize to every single person we dealt with during that time? Right? So that's what I think, that introspection and further look out is, you know, what do I want to leave behind? Like, how do I want to play this game?
Legacy.
And what do I want to leave behind when people look back at the game?
Yes. And when they look back at your record, when they look back at your Facebook 10 years from now, when you're going for that job and they say, hey, let's pick up your records. Let's look at your Twitter. Let's look at these breadcrumbs, because they tell a story. Be careful. Don't get caught up in this game. Hey, love you guys. Traci, thank you.
Thank you for your vulnerability today, Wulwyn. I think it was a precious gift for many people.
Hey, you guys have a good one. Yeah. Traci, you take care.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.